Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. It was a peaceful summer evening when my wife and I returned home after a relaxing weekend getaway. As we approached our house, we couldn't believe our eyes. There they were, a group of strangers luxuriating in our pool as if it were their own. Outrage coursed through me, and I instinctively switched into a defensive mode. With a military background, I possessed the skills necessary to handle trespassers, and this situation demanded action. I confronted the intruders, demanding to know who they were and why they were on my property without permission. The mother of the group, their self-proclaimed entitlement oozing from every pore, explained that the previous owner had allowed them to use the pool whenever they pleased. Frustration welled up within me as I explained that we were the new owners and that we had every right to determine who could access our property. The entitled mother, blinded by her own audacity, accused us of being selfish for denying her children the relief of our pool in the scorching summer heat. It was a preposterous claim, considering the audacity of trespassing in the first place. My wife, typically mellow but equally incensed, retorted that the entitled mother must be a poor mother indeed if she couldn't provide cold water and fans for her own children. It was a well-deserved burn that fueled our determination to stand our ground. After the confrontation, the group stormed off to their house, leaving us with a foreboding sense that this was just the beginning. Our instincts proved accurate as a few weeks later, we discovered evidence of their intrusion. Empty beer bottles, a foreign towel, and even a used condom by our poolside. Enough was enough. Determined to protect our sanctuary, we took action. We installed a prominently displayed no trespassing sign and security cameras connected to our phones to monitor any unauthorized access. Our vigilance paid off when we received a notification one fateful Friday night that motion had been detected by the pool. We swiftly returned home, parking inconspicuously elsewhere to maintain the illusion of an empty house. Armed with the discipline instilled by my military training, I approached the trespassers with caution. My wife and I confronted them, demanding an explanation for their repeated transgressions. Their shock and fear were palpable as they hastily exited the pool, scrambling for their belongings. I made it clear that any further movement would be seen as a threat, even though I had no intention of resorting to violence. One of the girls tearfully pleaded to retrieve her clothes, and we tossed their belongings into the pool, a symbolic gesture that mirrored their disregard for our property. While my wife called the authorities, I ensured the intruders knew the consequences of their actions. The police arrived swiftly, and I calmly explained the situation, providing them with the evidence from our security cameras and pointing out the clearly displayed no trespassing signs. The law was on our side. The trespassers were charged with multiple offenses, including trespassing, indecent exposure, and possession of controlled substances. Justice was served as the perpetrators faced community service, hefty fines, and a restraining order to protect us from their entitled behavior. To add insult to injury, the entitled mother was held responsible for the expenses of draining, cleaning, and disinfecting our pool. Though some might label me harsh or vindictive, knowing that the entitled mother had to bear the weight of the consequences brought me a sense of satisfaction. Our sanctuary was restored, and we could finally enjoy our property without fear of invasion. The next one is a pro-revenge story. After years of hearing stories of problems with homeowners associations, and having no tolerance for busybodies ourselves, my wife and I were both solidly in agreement that we would never purchase a home in an homeowners associations. When we finally did find a house and purchased it, we knew for a fact that we were not in an homeowners associations. However, just behind us, we learned there was a, not really homeowners associations. About a week after we moved in, there was a knock on the door. One of the neighbors behind us announced that she was the president of the homeowners associations and welcomed us to the neighborhood. Seemed civil enough, but we asked, "What homeowners associations?" "Oh, we're behind you. The home behind yours is where the homeowners association starts." "Okay, that's nice. Nice to meet you." Just general pleasantries. We were hopeful. We were shocked even. Someone associated with the management of an homeowners associations that wasn't a complete busybody psychopath. How wrong we were. The way our lot was, there was a sliver of green space between our property line and the sidewalk, in a somewhat triangular shape. The street ran west-southwest, our property line ran due east-west. So there was a wedge of land there. We'd always been told that this belonged to the homeowners associations, yada yada. No big deal. Just meant we didn't have to deal with the upkeep of this land. Now that this setup is all in place, it's time to start the story of how we got the Not Really Ann homeowners associations dissolved. We had a couple of trees in our yard, literally on the property line, so we took responsibility for taking care of these things. They're massive. They're also a pain in the butt, incredibly dense, heavy, and because of the way the limbs grow, they're prone to splitting and dropping limbs. There was a huge limb that extended way out into the street adjacent to the green space owned by the homeowners associations. This thing was a major risk of dropping and severely injuring/killing someone. We didn't want that on our conscience or our insurance, and so we decided to take that limb down entirely, as well as clean out a lot of the deadwood in the two trees. Hired an arborist, they came out, did their thing. $1,400 later, we were left with some decent-sized rounds that we were going to move over the next weekend. I was out of town the first weekend after we removed the limb. I should note that the wood was neatly stacked in the green space on the bark dust, out of everyone's way, and in no way a hazard or eyesore. Enter the shrieking harpy president of the homeowners associations. My wife had stepped out the door the day I had left on my trip, and she pulls up into our driveway, rolls down the window, and starts yelling at my wife, "You need to move that wood now. That's private property of the homeowners associations. Move it now!" My wife is not a confrontational type. She's also somewhat petite and tried to explain to the harpy that I was out of town and that we would be moving it as soon as I got back in town the next weekend. Nope, not good enough. She shrieks at my wife some more, and my wife ends up grabbing the wheelbarrow and somehow moves this stack of rounds. Some of them weighed close to 100 pounds. Around the fence, up our driveway, and into the backyard. She was pissed, so was I. We knew where the harpy lived, so when I got back I went over to talk to her, and explained that I was rather displeased with how she treated my wife. I didn't pound on the door or act aggressively. They wouldn't answer the door. Cowards. We knew they were home. This left us with a displeased taste in our mouths. The next spring, the hedge that was planted outside of our fence line wasn't maintained very well and pushed over 2 sections of our wooden fence. So I emailed the harpy and explained that their hedge had damaged our fence. "It's not our hedge." It's growing in your green space?" "That's not our green space." "Wait, what? Then why the censor did you decide to screech at my wife last summer when we had the wood stacked there?" Silence. Well, at that point, I fixed the fence so our dog wouldn't escape, after pruning the laurel back sufficiently that it wouldn't damage the fence again. And I started making some phone calls. I contacted the county and ended up speaking to about 7 different departments in order to figure out who actually owned that strip of land. After probably 2 weeks of trying to find the right people to talk to, I got to the roads division. The green space was marked as part of the right-of-way for the road, and therefore no one actually owned that space. So I can chop down that ugly, overgrown hedge that's encroaching on the sidewalk and knocking down my fence? "Yep," said the kind gentleman from the roads division. "As an aside," he asked, "you mentioned something about there being an homeowners associations associated with the plots to the east of your property?" "Yeah." "Well, part of what took me so long to get an answer for you is that it turns out there is no homeowners associations registered with the county there. So we were looking in the wrong place entirely." "Wait, there's no homeowners associations there?" "No, there hasn't ever been one since that subdivision was built." "Huh, interesting." And a plot was hatched. Plot was. We had befriended a couple of people within the neighborhood behind us, and they were rather fed up with Miss President of the Homeowners Associations and her antics. She was the typical busybody, bullying anyone she didn't like, and apparently, for the last 10 years or so, she had been collecting Homeowners Associations dues from everyone in the neighborhood to the tune of $300 per year. There were 36 homes in the Homeowners Associations. That's right around $100,000 in dues for a non-existent Homeowners Associations, with no real maintenance. Oh, they hosted an annual block party, potluck style. They pulled weeds from the green space on a volunteer basis. So I did what any red-blooded American would do. I got 36 envelopes, 36 stamps, and printed off 36 copies of a letter with my findings from the county that there was not now nor ever had been, for the recorded history of the subdivision, any homeowners associations, neighborhood association, or any similar organization, and that they, collectively, had paid in excess of $100,000 in dues over that time to a non-existent entity, plus any fines the non-existent homeowners associations had decided to levy. The neighbors, in turn, did exactly what any red-blooded American would do. They sued the hell out of her for every penny they'd paid over the last 10 years. And they won. And there's no longer an homeowners associations behind us. The next one is a petty revenge story. I, M22, used to live with 3 other guys. One of them had a girlfriend who was over all the time. She cleaned and bought stuff, so it was cool for a while. Then she asked us if she could pet sit 2 newborn kittens for a week while her parents were out of town. I knew I was allergic to dogs, but didn't know I was deathly allergic to cats. The cats get there, and after a day, I'm an allergic mess. However, I agreed to them staying. There's not much she can do with them, so I put up with it for a week. A week goes by, and the cats should be gone. I get home, and they are still there. The girlfriend says, "Oh, they're going to stay for another week." On top of that, the girlfriend's boyfriend, my roommate, his mom has fallen and hurt her neck pretty bad and is in the hospital, so now he is watching his dog at our apartment. So I try to keep cool. "Girl, the cats have gotta go. Sorry, the week is up. You can't just keep them here. I told you I'm allergic and you don't pay rent, so get them out." As for my roommate, I told him that I'm sorry about his mom, but that I can't keep living with animals I am allergic to. No one asked me if the dog could come, and no one asked me if the cats could stay longer. I suggest maybe they keep the animals at his girlfriend's apartment, who lives a whole mile away. "You are so ridiculous. You are crazy. My mom is in the hospital, and you care about my dog being here," says my roommate. "I can't just bring these animals to my apartment. I have roommates. What are we, idiot?" I respond. I storm out of the apartment and immediately head to the leasing office. I tell them that we have 3 animals in our apartment and that we have not paid the pet fee, $500 per animal. I ask them to come by later and make up an excuse that the animals are being too loud, neighbors are complaining, and that we didn't pay our pet deposit. The next day I come home from class and the girlfriend is crying on the couch. "The leasing office came by and said we had to get rid of the animals due to complaints." "Oh no," I respond. Luckily, they got a warning about the pets and didn't have to pay the $1,500. I suck at confrontation, so I love when other people can take the reins for me. The next one is an entitled people story. Backstory. My mom and dad split up when I was 12, and I, for one, was happy that they were separated. They were not bad people, they just weren't the right people for each other. My father still hasn't remarried, though he is currently dating someone. I don't really like her, but it's my dad's decision. My mom started dating a year after the divorce. She met my now stepfather, SF, who had a son. I became quite close to him since my biological brother went to live with my dad while I lived with my mom. When my mom announced her wedding, we were all excited, so SF's son became my official stepbrother, SB. Okay, we're done with the backstory. On to the real story. My SB and his girlfriend of 3 years were getting married. Now, the girlfriend happens to be my best friend, so I was extremely excited for them. I was chosen to be the maid of honor, and my biological brother, BB, was the best man. We were all that close. My SB's best friend, let's call him A, was one of the groomsmen. I never really liked A because he was a total creep, and always tried to hit on me when my SB wasn't there. SB is quite protective, so I didn't tell him, or he would have been arrested for murder. Also, I can stand up for myself. Anyway, once A finally got a girlfriend, he stopped annoying me. During the planning of the wedding, nothing crazy happened apart from the normal wedding stress. We invited almost everyone we knew, and it was going to be great, or so we thought. The big day arrived and everyone was ecstatic. The ceremony was beautiful and everything went great. Then the reception came. It was going great. The groom, bride, bridesmaids, and groomsmen were all seated at a table at the front of the venue, while the guests were sitting in front of us, so they were facing our table. Everyone was giving speeches and enjoying the food. Then, out of nowhere, A stood up and took the mic, saying he had something important to say. We were all confused as he had finished his speech, but we let him talk. I wish we hadn't. He asked his girlfriend to come up to the table, and I already knew where this was going. He started a speech on how much he loved her and how they were meant for each other. She was smiling, but I think she didn't want this to happen now, of all times. Then he knelt down and pulled a ring out of his pocket, asking her to marry him. She said yes. They started running around, showing people the ring, while my best friend, BFF, looked like she was going to cry. My SB and BB were whispering to each other, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. Finally, my mom got up to remind everyone that this was her son's wedding, and that we should stop talking about someone else's engagement. Everyone was quiet. Suddenly, we heard this banshee scream. The girlfriend started screaming and crying, saying my mom had ruined her special day. Then, A began screaming at us too, claiming that he did nothing wrong. They got kicked out in the end. My brother lost his best friend that day, but he didn't really care because that idiot lost all his friends. I'm also going to be a bit petty and say they can't even have a wedding because of COVID-19, so I hope they're happy. The next one is an entitled Parents' Story. Allow me to introduce you to my late mother-in-law. I'll call her Carol, for the sake of variety. Though I've heard many stories about her, for the most part, I'll stick with things that I witnessed myself. There are enough of them. I don't think Carol ever met a New Age concept that she didn't like. Her expressed goal was to synthesize all religion, science, and mysticism into a unified whole, all of it. To this end, she amassed a large collection of books and stranger objects from her travels, with a special focus on healing. Her library had volumes about vibration manipulation, curative trampolining, homeopathic color therapy, and on and on. I am not joking or exaggerating here. Her shelves had lots of admittedly pretty mineral crystals, along with bottles of magic goddess essence water, evaporated away, and bogus radon protectors, powered by diagrams of geometric figures. Her favorite book, based on the number of annotations and sticky notes, was hundreds of pages of word salad about spiritual beings from the star Arcturus. That's Arcturus, spelled with an H because of h-bar, Planck's constant from physics. Except that Planck's constant is denoted by H, and h-bar is the reduced Planck's constant. It's important to get the details right when you're dealing with spiritual beings. Her pentagonal home was custom built around an energy vortex that she discovered in the coastal peaks of British Columbia. Carol's parenting was, how shall I put this, more darkly eccentric. She was physically and emotionally abusive to her children. One still has some pencil lead embedded in his hand from when she stabbed him because she wasn't satisfied with his piano practice. She attacked one with a kitchen knife. She started slut-shaming her daughter, later my wife, as soon as she grew breasts, for growing breasts. So she forced her daughter to wear 2 large bathing suits, with the apparent intention of making said breasts look smaller by contrast, but with the actual effect that there were wardrobe malfunctions. She was ashamed that her daughter went into medicine and became a noted specialist rather than supporting her own non-traditional medical work. My wife got the hell out at age 17 and moved across the country to go to university. For most of the time after that, she went relatively low contact. A decade ago, my wife suffered from a surgical error which resulted in abdominal sepsis and asked me to call her mother. That made me understand just how deathly serious the situation was. I was to call in the family for what might be the last time. I hadn't grasped that her life was truly at risk until that point. Nothing less would have induced her to try to get her mother to visit. To her credit, Carol hurried out, for what was supposed to be a couple of weeks. It was expected that in that time, my wife would be either dead or on the road to recovery. Carol stayed in our home, and at first things didn't go too badly. For the most part, we just didn't talk about the treatments that my wife was undergoing. Carol did express concern about the antibiotics that were being given since, according to her own views, antibiotics did nothing but harm. But a couple of weeks stretched into a couple of months, and Carol became harder to live with. She was angry when I stroked my wife's hair with my hand because I was blocking the energy from her chakra. She started blaming me for having somehow caused the nausea that the botched surgery was supposed to cure. I drove her out to pick up a magical concoction of essential oils, on the condition that she check with one of the doctors before applying them. I pointed out that if the mixture had the power to heal, then it also had the power to cause harm, which Carol denied. When we got back to the hospital, I nabbed one of the residents when we reached my wife's floor to ask about that. Carol became furious about that, and it was clear that she had no intention of talking with the doctors. At home, she became more abusive to me. She claimed that I was abusing my wife by not letting her have her things in the house. At that point, I lost my temper, the first time I'd yelled at a person in literally a couple of decades. I told her that almost everything in sight was actually her daughter's, displacing my stuff: the sofas, the piano, tables and chairs, the bookshelves, and the electronics. The shelves for the CDs and DVDs were mine, but half the contents were hers. Carol wanted to know if I'd be continuing the herbal remedies after she left, and I told her that that was up to my wife. I'd continue them if she wanted. I'd stop them if she preferred. Carol screamed that I was abusing my wife by following her own wishes rather than her mother's. On the night before Carol was finally supposed to be heading out, I was restless. That particular nightmare was about to end, but my wife was still quite ill. I got to thinking about that essential oil mixture, which included both oil of cloves and oil of cinnamon. Those are both strongly irritating if left on the skin, and Carol had been painting my wife's feet with the stuff. Her feet were apparently the correct energy points to draw out the infection. I went online and found the manufacturer's instructions, which specified that the oil needed to be significantly diluted with some neutral oil if it was going to be applied to the skin. Carol hadn't even been using the stuff properly. Well, that explained why the skin on my wife's feet was yellow and starting to peel. But Carol was furious when I calmly pointed out the problems that she was creating out of ignorance. A few days after Carol left, my wife took a turn for the worse and had to go back into the intensive care unit, and I dreaded the phone call that I had to make, not because of the bad news, but because I anticipated how Carol would react. And she didn't disappoint. If you really loved her, you put her back onto the herbal oil and stop the antibiotics. You know perfectly well they don't do a damn lick of good. At which point I hung up. I had other things to worry about. My wife pulled through after months in the hospital and 3 stays in the ICU. She's still in poor health. I told her that I was putting my foot down. Under no circumstances was her mother welcome under my roof again. She had grossly abused her privileges as a house guest. I didn't care about the family custom that family members were always welcome to stay as guests. I would not stay under the same roof as her mother. Having heard my stories, and based on her own experiences, my wife agreed. A few years ago, Carol died, much as she had lived. She was diagnosed with metastasized lung cancer. Although she did undergo some real medical therapies, she relied mostly on her quack remedies: pawpaw twig powder, whey protein immune boosters, and the like, the usual crap that ethics-free swindlers pawn off on desperate sufferers. She firmly believed that all the little white spots on her lung x-rays were a good sign, and that her rapid weight loss indicated that her boosters were draining the cancer away. If there's some existence after death, I hope she came to appreciate all of the harm that she did in life. Except, a couple of nights after she passed away, I was driving from the hospital back to the Energy Vortex house. The rental car's navigation device suggested a shorter route than I'd taken to get there, but that route turned into a back road, into a rough road in the hills, into a track through the forest and in pitch darkness apart from my headlights, over a rocky bump and directly into a tree trunk. Luckily, I was traveling slowly and stopped in time. As I paused, shaken, I got to wondering if there might be something to Carol's worldview after all, and if her vengeful spirit might have possessed the GPS device, making one last try at killing me. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow. Again.